Carl Jung documented why people with what we now call empathic abilities face a cruel psychological paradox. Their greatest gift becomes the source of their deepest pain. He discovered that empathic individuals unconsciously attract people who project their shadow onto them. People who resent the empath's emotional freedom because it reminds them of their own emotional numbness. Jung found that the more authentic and radiant someone with highly developed feeling function becomes, the more they threaten others' psychological defenses. What Jung called shadow projection creates a pattern where empaths are simultaneously sought after and secretly despised for possessing what others have lost or buried within themselves. Today, I'll reveal Jung's most disturbing discovery about empathic psychology and why he believed this pattern either destroys sensitive individuals completely or transforms them into exactly what humanity needs for its emotional evolution. The pattern that revealed Jung's most chilling insight emerged from multiple cases he observed in his clinical practice. Individuals with extraordinary empathic abilities who seemed to magnetize people that would eventually turn against them with inexplicable hostility. Jung consistently documented what I call luminous emotional authenticity in these patients. They could sense others' pain instantly, respond with genuine compassion, and create safe spaces where people felt truly understood for the first time in their lives. Yet every close relationship followed the same devastating pattern. Jung's observations revealed, these individuals draw others to them like moths to flame. Yet these same people develop unconscious resentment toward the very qualities that initially attracted them. It is as if their light exposes shadows others cannot bear to acknowledge. People would confess their deepest secrets to them, find healing in their presence, and experience profound emotional relief. Then, without warning, they would begin to criticize them, undermine their confidence, and eventually abandon them entirely, often blaming them for being too intense or too much. Jung realized he wasn't observing simple relationship dysfunction. He was witnessing what happens when unconscious people encounter someone who has maintained connection to their authentic feeling function. The pattern Jung documented would become one of his most important insights into human psychology. Authentic emotional expression triggers unconscious shame in those who have betrayed their own emotional truth. If you've ever been criticized for being too emotional or too intense, write this in the comments. My empathy is not too much, others are too numb. Jung's observations of this phenomenon led him to identify what modern psychology now recognizes as psychological mirroring theory. When individuals with highly developed feeling function interact with emotionally disconnected people, they unconsciously reflect back the emotional authenticity those people have abandoned. Jung's research revealed that most people disconnect from their authentic emotions early in life as a survival mechanism. They learn to suppress sensitivity, hide vulnerability, and operate from false personas that gain social acceptance but cost them their emotional aliveness. What I call the authenticity wound shows how people who have cut themselves off from genuine feeling develop unconscious hostility toward those who haven't. The empath's natural emotional expression becomes a painful reminder of what they've lost. Jung observed that what we now call empaths fall into what I term the mirror trap. Their authentic presence automatically triggers others' repressed emotions and buried pain. This creates intense discomfort in people who have built their entire identity around emotional numbness. The person caught in this dynamic experiences what I call projection amplification. They unconsciously blame the empath for making them feel emotions they've spent years avoiding. The empath becomes responsible for pain that existed long before they entered the picture. Jung noted something even more disturbing. People often seek out those with empathic gifts specifically because their unconscious recognizes what they've lost. They're drawn to the emotional aliveness they observe, yet simultaneously resent it because it exposes their own emotional death. This creates what Jung identified as the fundamental psychological paradox affecting sensitive individuals. Jung's most disturbing discovery about empaths was how they become targets for what he extensively documented as shadow projection, where people unconsciously transfer their own rejected qualities onto the empath, then attack them for possessing these very traits. Through his analytical work, Jung found that people who resent empaths are actually resenting parts of themselves they've disowned. The empath's emotional sensitivity reminds them of their own buried sensitivity. The empath's authenticity exposes their own falsehood. What makes this particularly cruel is that empaths often possess the exact qualities these people once had but learned to suppress. Jung observed the individual attacks in the empath what they have killed within themselves. The resentment is not toward the empath. It is toward their own abandoned emotional truth. This creates what I call the innocence-punishment dynamic. People who have lost their emotional innocence through trauma or social conditioning unconsciously punish those who have managed to preserve theirs. Comment below if you've attracted people who later turned against you for no clear reason. I recognize shadow projection when I see it. Jung documented how this manifests in subtle but devastating ways. People will criticize empaths for being too sensitive when they themselves wish they could feel deeply again. They'll mock empathic responses as naive when they've simply become cynical to protect themselves from pain. The most insidious aspect is that these attacks often come disguised as concern or advice. You need to toughen up. The world will eat you alive. You're too trusting. These statements reveal the speaker's own emotional wounds while attempting to dim the empath's light. Jung realized this wasn't conscious malice. It was unconscious self-hatred being projected outward onto someone who represented what they could no longer access within themselves. Through his analytical work with empaths and their relationships, Jung identified 4 distinct patterns of how people unconsciously attack empathic individuals for their authentic emotional expression. Type 1: the emotional critic. Jung documented people who specifically target empaths' emotional responses. These individuals have learned to suppress their own feelings so completely that witnessing authentic emotion triggers unconscious shame about their own emotional deadness. What I call feeling police are people who constantly tell empaths their emotions are wrong, excessive, or inappropriate. They've internalized the message that emotions are weakness and project this belief onto empaths. Type 2: the authenticity attacker. These individuals unconsciously resent empaths for being genuine because they've built their entire identity around false personas. Jung observed how people who live behind masks feel threatened by those who don't need masks to survive. What I term the performance police criticize empaths for being too real or inappropriate when they simply haven't learned to hide their authentic selves behind social facades. If you've ever dimmed your authentic self to make others comfortable, comment, "I will no longer shrink to fit their emotional limitations." Type 3: the vulnerability violator. Jung noted people who specifically target empaths' openness and trust. These individuals have been hurt so badly that they've closed their hearts completely, and they unconsciously punish empaths for maintaining emotional availability. What I call the trust destroyers are people who take advantage of empathic openness then blame empaths for being too trusting rather than acknowledging their own betrayal of that trust. Type 4: the light dimmer. The most dangerous type Jung encountered were people who systematically worked to diminish empaths' confidence in their own gifts. They've disconnected from their own inner light so completely that others' radiance becomes unbearable. What I term the brightness reducers use subtle psychological manipulation to convince empaths that their natural empathy is a problem to be fixed rather than a gift to be honored. Comment if you've realized that others' resentment of your sensitivity reveals their own wounds. Their attacks on my light expose their inner darkness. Understanding your specific pattern is crucial because each type requires different strategies for what Jung called the protection of authentic self. Jung identified 3 specific dangers that made this psychological dynamic a serious threat to both individual empaths and collective emotional evolution. Danger 1: the authenticity erosion. Jung observed that constant exposure to resentment and criticism causes many empaths to begin doubting their own emotional reality. They start suppressing their natural responses to fit in with people who can't tolerate authentic emotion. He wrote, "The empath who abandons their authenticity to gain acceptance loses the very quality that made them valuable. They become another emotionally dead person in a world that desperately needs emotional aliveness." This creates what Jung called the dimming epidemic. Empaths learning to hide their light to avoid triggering others' unconscious hostility. Danger 2: psychological self-betrayal. Jung documented how empaths often internalize the criticism they receive, beginning to see their empathy as a flaw rather than a gift. They start believing they're too much or too sensitive instead of recognizing that others are often too little and too numb. The greatest tragedy occurs when the empath begins attacking their own emotional nature with the same violence others have directed toward them. They become their own emotional assassin. Danger 3: collective emotional stagnation. Most dangerously, Jung found that when empaths learn to suppress their authenticity, humanity loses its emotional pioneers. The individuals capable of modeling what healthy emotional expression looks like. Jung called this emotional evolution arrest. When the people most capable of advancing collective emotional intelligence are forced into hiding to protect themselves from unconscious attacks. He wrote, The suppression of empathic individuals represents humanity's unconscious rejection of its own emotional potential. We attack in others what we most need to reclaim within ourselves. This is why Jung considered the protection and development of empathic individuals essential for human psychological advancement. Jung developed what I call the authentic self-preservation protocol, a systematic approach to maintaining empathic gifts while protecting against unconscious projection from others. If you found people who celebrate rather than criticize your empathic gifts, right? I found my tribe. Those who appreciate authentic feeling. Phase 1: Recognition and Validation. Jung taught individuals with empathic gifts to first recognize that the resentment they face isn't personal. It's shadow projection from people who have lost connection to their own feeling function. Jung understood that hatred directed toward their authenticity is actually self-hatred being projected outward. The empathic individual is not the problem. They are the mirror reflecting someone else's inner wound. Technique: Jung instructed empaths to interpret criticism and hostility as information about the critic's psychological state rather than accurate feedback about their own behavior. Phase 2: Boundary crystallization. Jung discovered that those with empathic abilities need what I call energetic boundaries, the ability to maintain their authentic expression while protecting themselves from others' unconscious projections. Comment below if you're ready to protect your empathic nature while serving those who can receive it. I choose conscious empathy over unconscious absorption. This involves learning to distinguish between genuine feedback that serves individuation and projection-based attacks designed to dim their authentic self-expression. Jung called this developing psychological discernment. If you've learned to distinguish between genuine feedback and projection-based attacks, comment, I know the difference between truth and shadow. Phase 3: Selective engagement. The final phase involves what Jung called conscious relationship choices. The ability to connect deeply with people who appreciate authenticity while maintaining distance from those who resent it. Jung's approach emphasized that empathic individuals serve no one by dimming their feeling function to accommodate those who prefer emotional numbness. Their authentic expression is medicine for those ready to heal and mirror for those ready to see. This requires developing what I call vibrational matching, attracting people who resonate with authenticity rather than those who fear it. Jung's insights extended beyond clinical work to include historical figures who successfully maintained their empathic nature despite facing resentment for their emotional authenticity. The case of Saint Francis of Assisi, successful integration. Jung studied how Francis maintained radical empathy and emotional openness despite criticism from religious authorities who preferred emotional suppression. Francis demonstrated what I call authentic integration. Francis faced constant criticism for being too emotional and too compassionate. Yet he never dimmed his empathic response to suffering. His authentic spiritual expression threatened those who had made religion into an intellectual exercise devoid of genuine feeling. Jung noted that Francis's success came from recognizing that criticism of his empathy revealed the spiritual poverty of his critics rather than flaws in his own nature. The case of Vincent van Gogh, unprotected sensitivity. Jung observed how Van Gogh's extraordinary empathic perception created incredible art, but also made him vulnerable to others' unconscious resentment of his emotional intensity. Van Gogh's letters reveal how people consistently criticized him for being too much, too emotional, too intense, too sensitive. Unlike Francis, Van Gogh internalized these criticisms and began attacking his own empathic nature. Jung's analysis showed that Van Gogh possessed the empathic vision necessary for genius, but lacked the psychological protection required to preserve it. His tragedy was not his sensitivity, but his belief that others' inability to tolerate it meant something was wrong with him. Jung's own light protection journey. Most significantly, Jung documented his own experience as an individual with empathic abilities, navigating professional environments that often resented emotional depth and psychological insight. Jung learned that his ability to see psychological truth threatened those who preferred psychological falsehood. His choice was to dim his perception to gain acceptance or maintain it and accept potential isolation from those who fear authentic seeing. Jung's breakthrough came when he realized that protecting his empathic gifts served not just his own individuation but the advancement of psychological understanding itself. Jung emphasized that empaths need what he called vibrational sanctuary. Relationships with others who appreciate rather than resent authentic emotional expression. Jung wrote, "The empath cannot thrive in emotional isolation. Yet they cannot survive in relationships with those who attack their authenticity." They must create conscious community with others who celebrate rather than suppress emotional aliveness. Type 1 Fellow empathic individuals. Jung identified the importance of connecting with others who share empathic gifts. These relationships are characterized by mutual recognition, emotional safety, and appreciation for sensitivity rather than criticism of it. These connections often form quickly because both parties feel relief at finding someone who doesn't try to dim their light or criticize their emotional responses. Type 2 Emotionally evolved non-empaths. Jung observed that some people, while not naturally empathic, have done enough psychological work to appreciate and protect empathic individuals. They recognize empathy as a gift rather than a flaw. These individuals often serve as bridges between the empathic person and the broader world, helping to create safer spaces for authentic expression. Type 3 Conscious light appreciators. Jung identified people who, regardless of their own empathic abilities, consciously choose to support and protect authentic emotional expression in others. They understand that empathic individuals serve an important function in collective emotional evolution. Recognition signals. Jung developed specific indicators for identifying safe relationships. They ask about your emotional experiences with genuine curiosity rather than judgment. They appreciate your empathic insights rather than criticizing your sensitivity. They protect your emotional energy rather than draining it. They encourage your authentic expression rather than asking you to dim it. They recognize your empathy as a strength rather than treating it as a weakness. Community building process. Jung taught empaths to gradually reveal their authentic nature while observing how others respond. Begin with small expressions of empathic insight. Notice whether people appreciate or resent your emotional awareness. Assess whether they protect or violate your emotional boundaries. Gradually increase authenticity with those who demonstrate appreciation. Create distance from those who consistently attack your empathic nature. Jung emphasized, the goal is not to hide your light, but to share it with those who can appreciate its beauty rather than resent its brightness. Jung viewed successful empath development as essential not just for individual well-being, but for collective emotional advancement toward more authentic human connection. Jung wrote, the empath who successfully integrates their gifts while protecting their authenticity becomes a beacon for others seeking to reconnect with their own emotional truth. They prove that sensitivity and strength can coexist. The 4 stages of light integration. Stage 1 Recognition without suppression. The first transformation occurs when empaths learn to recognize resentment directed toward them as projection rather than accurate feedback. Jung called this projection immunity. Jung observed, wisdom begins when the empath stops believing that others' inability to tolerate their light means they should dim it. The problem lies not in being too much but in others becoming too little. Stage 2 Boundary development without hardening. The second stage involves creating energetic protection while maintaining emotional openness. Jung called this selective permeability, the ability to remain empathic while protecting against projection. He noted, the integrated empath learns to distinguish between authentic emotional connection and psychological attack disguised as relationship. They remain open to love while becoming immune to hatred. Stage 3 Community creation without compromise. The third transformation happens when empaths stop trying to gain acceptance from those who resent authenticity and instead focus on building relationships with those who appreciate it. Jung wrote, the empath's evolution requires releasing the need to be understood by everyone and focusing on being truly known by the right people. Quality of connection matters more than quantity of acceptance. Stage 4 Service without sacrifice. The final stage involves what Jung called authentic service. Using empathic gifts to help others while maintaining strong boundaries against those who would exploit or resent these abilities. Jung observed, the fully integrated empath serves from overflow rather than depletion. They give their gifts to those who can receive them without demanding acceptance from those who cannot. The integration creates cultural healing. Jung believed that protected empaths serve a vital evolutionary function. They model what healthy emotional expression looks like while maintaining their ability to help others reconnect with their own buried authenticity. Jung wrote, the empath who successfully preserves their light in a world that often prefers darkness becomes a living reminder that emotional death is not inevitable. They carry the flame that others can use to reignite their own emotional aliveness. Jung documented specific dangers that can derail empaths' journey toward authentic self-preservation and conscious community building. Pitfall 1 The Revenge Trap. Jung observed that some empaths, upon recognizing how they've been treated, develop resentment toward those who attack their authenticity. They begin attacking others' emotional numbness the way others attack their emotional aliveness. He warned the empath who responds to unconscious attack with conscious attack has learned the wrong lesson. Understanding projection does not justify projecting in return. Jung noted that empaths who fall into this trap often become the very thing they once suffered from. People who attack others for their psychological differences. Pitfall 2: The superiority complex. Jung documented cases where empaths used their understanding of unconscious dynamics to feel superior to those who resent their authenticity. They developed what he called enlightened arrogance. Jung wrote, "The empath who believes their emotional aliveness makes them better than others has missed the point entirely. Their gift is meant to serve healing, not to create hierarchy." Pitfall 3: The isolation justification. Jung observed that some empaths use their understanding of projection to justify complete withdrawal from challenging relationships. They convinced themselves that anyone who couldn't appreciate their gifts wasn't worth engaging. He noted, "True integration requires the empath to maintain their authenticity while remaining compassionately available to those ready to receive their gifts. Isolation serves no one." Pitfall 4: The light dimming. Most dangerously, Jung found that some empaths, despite understanding the dynamics, still chose to suppress their authenticity to avoid conflict. They intellectually understood projection but emotionally remained afraid of others' resentment. Jung emphasized understanding why others attack your light does not eliminate the pain of being attacked. The empath must develop genuine inner strength, not just intellectual insight. The integration maintenance. Jung developed ongoing practices for maintaining authentic expression while protecting against projection. Regular assessment of which relationships support versus drain your empathic gifts. Conscious choice about when to engage empathically and when to maintain protective boundaries. Connection with others who share similar experiences and challenges. Recognition that some people may never be able to appreciate authentic emotion. Focus on serving those who can receive your gifts rather than trying to convert those who resent them. Jung wrote, "The authentic empath does not try to force their light on everyone, but ensures their light continues burning for those who need its warmth." Jung understood empathic psychology within the context of collective emotional evolution, viewing authentic empathic individuals as essential for humanity's advancement toward more genuine emotional expression. Jung believed that individuals who maintain their feeling function despite unconscious attacks serve as evidence that emotional aliveness is possible even in an emotionally disconnected world. They are emotional pioneers, showing others the path back to their own hearts. The historical pattern. Jung observed that throughout history, empathic individuals have served as bridges between humanity's emotional past and its emotional future. They preserve emotional wisdom during times of collective numbness and model emotional healing when others are ready to receive it. Jung noted that what appears in the empathic individual as personal emotional authenticity later manifests in the collective as cultural emotional evolution. They serve as keepers of the flame during humanity's dark emotional ages. Modern manifestations. Jung believed that in the modern era what we now call empaths might be sensing and responding to collective emotional trauma that needs conscious processing. Buried authentic feeling that requires expression for collective healing. The cost of emotional suppression on individual and social well-being. Possibilities for more genuine human connection beyond surface-level interaction. The need for emotional intelligence in leadership and decision-making. Jung's insight. The empathic individual feels collectively what others feel individually but suppress. Their emotional responses often reflect what the entire culture needs to process consciously. The service through authenticity. Jung's crucial insight was that those with empathic gifts serve others best not by dimming their feeling function to make others comfortable, but by maintaining their authenticity to show others what emotional aliveness looks like. Jung understood that empathic individuals serve humanity not by becoming emotionally numb like everyone else, but by remaining emotionally alive despite everyone else. Their authenticity is medicine for a world suffering from what I call emotional evolution arrest. The ultimate integration at the highest level of development. Jung observed, empaths learn to hold their gifts with both strength and compassion, maintaining their authenticity while understanding that others' resentment comes from pain rather than malice. What I call luminous compassion represents the ability to shine their light fully while having empathy for those who cannot yet tolerate that brightness. Remember Jung's pattern from his clinical practice. Individuals whose empathic abilities seem to magnetize people who would eventually turn against them with inexplicable hostility. After working with Jung's integration method, this relationship pattern could be completely transformed. These individuals learn to recognize resentment directed toward their authenticity as information about others' psychological wounds rather than evidence that something was wrong with their feeling function. They found their tribe, people who celebrated rather than attacked their empathic gifts. They began using their abilities to serve those who could receive them rather than trying to gain acceptance from those who resented them. Most importantly, they stopped dimming their emotional authenticity to accommodate others' preference for emotional numbness. Jung's observations revealed that these patients learned their empathic nature was not a flaw to be corrected, but a gift to be protected. They discovered that the problem was never their emotional aliveness. It was others' emotional disconnection and their unconscious resentment of what they had lost within themselves. This represents Jung's most important discovery about empathic psychology. Those who resent your authenticity are usually mourning their own abandoned feeling function. Their hostility toward your emotional aliveness reveals their grief over their own suppressed emotional truth. Your empathic nature isn't too much for this world. This world has simply become too disconnected from its own emotional potential. You're not broken because others can't tolerate your feeling function. They're wounded because they've learned to tolerate emotional numbness. The question isn't whether people will resent your authenticity. The question is whether you'll protect your feeling function while having compassion for those who have lost theirs. Jung's integration method offers a path from unconscious victimhood to conscious service. From hiding your gifts to sharing them wisely. From suppressing your authenticity to letting it shine for those who need its warmth. You were born to be empathically alive, not to dim yourself for those who prefer emotional disconnection, but to model emotional authenticity for those ready to reclaim their own buried feeling function. The world needs your light, but it needs it burning brightly rather than hidden under the bushel of others' unconscious projection. Your empathy isn't your weakness. Others' inability to tolerate authentic emotion is their unhealed wound projected onto your strength. Learn Jung's integration principles and you become exactly what he believed empathic individuals were meant to be. Bridges between humanity's emotional past and its emotional future. Keepers of authentic feeling in a world that has forgotten how to feel. Healers who maintain their own wholeness while helping others remember theirs. Jung's most important discovery wasn't that people resent empaths' authenticity. It's that this resentment reveals humanity's unconscious grief over its own lost emotional truth. Your light doesn't need to dim. Their capacity to appreciate authenticity needs to brighten. You are not too much for anyone. The right people will celebrate your empathic gifts, while the wrong people reveal themselves through their resentment of what they can no longer access within themselves. If you recognize yourself in Jung's description of an empath who attracts unconscious resentment, you're part of a rare group that Jung believed essential for humanity's emotional evolution. Share in the comments which type of light resentment you've experienced. Your journey toward authentic self-preservation connects with others walking the same path. Subscribe for more insights into Jung's discoveries about empathic psychology and emotional authenticity. Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension.